What's up? Welcome back to Nowstalgia. Dave here with a reaction to the writer's strike ending. The 2023 Writers Guild strike is over after 146 days, the second longest writer's strike in Hollywood history. Of course, it's not still official. They have to ratify that. That'll take some more time, but it's done. And it's very monumental, obviously. Now, SAG-AFTRA, the actors, are still on strike as well, but they are reportedly planning to meet with AMPT, the studios, the distributors, in the coming days. All the talk all along has been the writers were at the forefront of the fight. The actors will probably now follow suit and settle as well. So there's probably not going to be too much trouble with that. And yeah, I mean, there's so many starts and stops, so many allegations of bad faith, particularly from the writers onto the studios. The strike is over, and by all accounts, I would say the writers won. They got stuff that they were not being offered on May 1st. Significant advances to the proposal, um, and that is good. Broadly, obviously, and I think there's a lot to learn from how this went. Obviously, organized labor, union labor, is very strong right now. Look no further than what's happening with auto workers across other industries. SAG for the video game actors, voice actors, and mocap actors have authorized a strike as well. Union labor is going well, and whether it's a convenient time for the industry and given the economy, kind of doesn't really matter because it's about the actual workers doing the work, right? And yeah, I think just broadly in terms of the writer's strike, right? They got the broad minimums raise in terms of pay raises across the board to be expected. That's kind of the bare minimum whenever a new contract comes up. This is of course a 3-year contract, but some of the key sticking points that led to the strike, led to the disconnect between the studios and the Writers Guild. Um, when it comes to staffing, minimums based on episode count have been agreed to. Now, that wasn't the full ask of the writers. The writers wanted mandatory minimums for writers' rooms, kind of a effort to combat the mini room and how the studios have often been basically cutting writers out and in cost cutting the field in a certain sense. So it's not the full ask, but getting some kind of minimum standard applied, this time based on episode count. The showrunners will still have some say in how things go. It's certainly an improvement. Perhaps the biggest sticking point of all, the writers got broad AI, broad artificial intelligence protections in terms of their work. Now, there was a stipulation that the studios can use AI to experiment, but there seems to be a clear delineation. Again, this is a huge win, given there was nothing about AI in the initial proposal before. This is good. Consumption-based residuals. Again, we don't know the exact details of this, but consumption-based residuals, important. Not that anyone was ever expecting the writers to get the old school residual model back, in the days of syndication. Like, you're not going to get the Friends, Seinfeld level paydays that no one expected that to ever come back. But some kind of consumption-based residual where if a show does well, your residual is in fact stronger, and not just kind of a generic buy out in the beginning. This is, I think, a really smart and important thing to fight for, because the old residual pay structure that did exist, kind of really didn't exist at all, was outdated for the streaming landscape. And I think this is certainly an improvement. Now, it's not all rosy, I think, on this front. There was a lot of big fight for data transparency. And that was a huge sticking point for the studios, especially a huge sticking point for the tech companies, right? Amazon, Apple, and Netflix, especially, right? Data will be shared with a small group of people. The broad membership, the broad public won't learn about the data, but people will at least have some insight. At least the guild leaders will have some insight into what's doing well. So again, a win in a certain sense, a refresh to how the writers are treated in the streaming uh, model. Now, I think it's the takeaways on this. I think we had there seemed to be some showrunners putting some pressure on the guild to get things done, and of course on the other side, with all the studio CEOs, all the famous people, right, Bob Iger, Zaslav, etc., getting really involved in person in the most recent round of negotiations. Pressure on all sides to get this done, obviously, because of the damage it causes to the industry as a work stoppage. The effects will be seen for a while, even if the actors resolve their dispute soon. And I think the social media support for the writers and the vitriol thrown at the CEOs of the studios, particularly the villainization of the studios, that was probably something unforeseen by the PTP, and I think it goes a long way to just the general sentiment of how these people are viewed, and that was probably unforced error on their part. Every headline about the studios hiring crisis firms while they were refusing to actually negotiate in good faith and just kind of getting exposed for um, not making counter proposals and immediately so obviously leaking to the trade papers. And I think the trade papers as well got pretty exposed for being just bootlicking to the studios. Deadline, Variety, Hollywood Reporter, but really Deadline, Variety especially looked absolutely horrible in how they frame certain things. I have to say, I don't think people will forget that. Um, yeah, I mean, so much of the damage is already done, right? Dune delayed to March, Challengers delayed to I believe April, delayed to the spring, right? Craven the Hunter delayed all the way to August. I thank God for the Taylor Swift Eras Tour concert movie, to be completely honest, because that box office is needed for the fall, for the theaters and the business and whatnot. Um, it's really a shame that this had to come to this, but that's why you don't back down, because you have to fight for these things. Because if you don't fight for them now, how are you going to fight for them later? How's it going to be any better? There's no time like now, so it's a huge win for the little people, for the writers, right? Again, some of the narratives thrown out there about the really famous people that make a lot of money well above the minimums, they were not the ones being fought for with this, despite their support. I think that's kind of obvious to most people with critical thinking in their brains. Nonetheless, the strike is done. We expect the actors' strike to end soon. SAG, the Hollywood actors, anyway. I think the video game stuff is going to be completely separate for now, but positive development. Hopefully, this leads to no more film delays, because as soon as the actors' strike gets resolved, actors can get back to promoting their work, and thus the studios won't feel the need to push things out to give those projects a better chance of succeeding at a future date. So hopefully the damage is done there. We'll see about future release dates though with tentpoles, right? Because um, a lot of tentpoles for 2024 and beyond were not finished, and now there's a huge crunch on talent getting back to work and scheduling that talent. You can't just finish every single movie at the same time. There's not enough time in the day, obviously. So there'll still be ramifications to all that. We'll see how those dominoes play out. But at least the worst of it is over. The writer's strike, the second longest in Hollywood history, has concluded. Let me know, how do you feel about how this has all gone? What do you think the lasting impact will be? Obviously, this will not be the last time we talk about AI in Hollywood, but the first salvo went about as good as it could have gone, mostly, we think. But let me know how you feel about it. And for more reactions to work stoppages in the entertainment industry, subscribe, and I'll see you next time.